I'm back. Welcome to season 2 of the How to Be an Author podcast. I have missed you all, and it may feel like a really long time to you, or maybe like the blink of an eye, you didn't even notice I was gone. But believe it or not, I have been away from my usual writing and coaching duties for almost an entire month. Now, this was a planned break, and I knew that the holidays and surrounding travel would make a break necessary because there's nothing as frustrating as trying to keep up your normal breakneck schedule when you are going to be interrupted by things such as the technical details of getting from point A to point B, or entertaining family, or various celebrations or events. I think that it's pretty self-sabotaging to try to keep all those plates spinning when you just know that a few of them are going to have to fall. But even though I planned for my break, more about that in a bit, and I had a plan for how I would spend my break, more about that too, but what the hell was I thinking? And even though I had a date for exactly when my break would end, which was basically today, you probably won't be shocked when you hear that this whole process didn't exactly go as planned, and it's been a real eye-opener, and I thought it would be kind of important for me to share with you, a fellow writer, how I feel about this whole break thing, because many of us take a break and then it doesn't go as planned, and returning from the break and starting up again after the break, whether it's with our creative part of our writing process or the other stuff that comes with being a writer, I think it's more challenging than maybe I considered. So am I coming out of this break with renewed clarity, purpose, vision, and resolve? Absolutely. But did I totally freak out in the days leading up to today to such a degree that I absolutely did not sleep and had to calm myself down with nonstop sleep hypnosis sessions? More about that later. If you're a writing coach on demand person, you'll get the links to my favorite sleep hypnosis sessions. Yeah, those really work. But this whole process really had me thinking about how when you take a break, which everyone takes, not just for writing, we take breaks from various things like the gym or eating healthily or sending out newsletters or posting on social media, or maybe we take a break from drinking or socializing or volunteering. But you take a hiatus from these things, which can be really healthy. But one of the things I didn't realize was that it's not really easy. Oftentimes, people are reticent to take those much needed breaks, or they'll take a break that's not really a break. Or they'll take a break and they'll realize that their old patterns and priorities were not helpful. And then they'll wonder how the heck they're supposed to change gears or direction without throwing all of their hard work away. And sometimes you feel like you really don't want to start up again. And that's really a thing. But often quitting is not an option, or at least it's not the right thing to do. Or maybe it's just a reaction to how we're feeling. I totally get that. And the real problem is whether the break was conscious and intentional or planned or not, starting up again can be a real challenge. And so that's why I wanted to do this episode today. And when I was doing the research on this episode for the How to Be an Author podcast, when I was doing research on starting up with writing after a hiatus, every single thing I read was about falling in love with the craft of writing enough. Fair enough. That's super important. But honestly, even though I have definitely felt burnt out on the actual writing process at times, the pure writing stuff is, for me at least, what's most fun and rewarding. It's everything else that's more of a pain. The self-promotion, the author platform, facing all the rejection, dealing with feedback, all of that stuff. So let's talk about all of that today on the podcast. And I think it's going to be really, really useful, especially if you, like me, are kind of emerging from the holidays, emerging from a break, or maybe you're considering taking a break in the new year. I think that going into this with absolute clarity on what it might be like and what to do during your break and how to ease back into writing, because easing is key. Let's talk about that. And I think it's going to be helpful. And definitely, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to contact me via email on my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com, or all of that good stuff. You'll be hearing more on how to reach out to me and reach me throughout this episode. So let's get started. If you're a writer dreaming of becoming a successful author, join me, writing coach Karenna Akavane, on the How to Be an Author podcast, your weekly source for writing information, inspiration, and motivation. So here's the most crucial thing to realize. Starting up again after a hiatus is not like flipping a switch. We treat it like that, but it's not like that. It's a whole entire process. And that is why in this week's episode of the podcast, we're going to go over how to emerge from a break, even if it's an overly long break. And I want you all to come out of these breaks with renewed energy, focus, strategy, productivity, purpose, whether it's for your writing or your writer platform or both. So this week's episode, as crucial as it is, I also want you to check out, if you haven't done so yet, my podcast episode back in season 1 about overcoming resistance. I think that could be a great place to start or follow up with, because oftentimes we do have terrific resistance to starting up again after a break. And that's something that should not be ignored. That resistance is trying to teach you something. But I will leave you to figure that out from listening to the previous resistance episode in season 1. Now that we're fresh up in season 2, I'm going to give you a little spoiler alert from this episode, which is that one of the most helpful things when starting up again is to give yourself a new form of support. And whether that is working with a writing coach like me or taking a course such as my From Idea to Published in 6 Months masterclass, getting help and structure can change everything for you. So don't forget to book your free 15-minute call with me to discuss the different ways that working with me, your writing coach, can help no matter your budget. Definitely do that. I would love to hear from you. So thank you for being here. Now let's get started so we can transition out of these breaks and start getting those writing goals totally smashed. So the first thing to do is, if you are ending your break, I want you to look back on what you did on your break, because it's not really a break if you're doing the same exact thing, or if you tried to squeeze too much into it, or all of those things. So is it really a break? That's something really important to know, because if it wasn't really a break, I'm thinking that maybe you can squeeze in one last breaky thing before you stop the break that you didn't really have. So for me, for example, I was working on a book that I finished under my pen name. And I'm really proud of that book, but boy, let me tell you, it was a massive process. And since I worked so hard all the way up to my break, I didn't really give myself enough transition time to go from working flat out on all my writing client things and on my course to working on this whole different book that really I was like, oh, I lied to myself. I was like, it's almost finished. I just need to edit it and get it out there. Boy, let me tell you, when you're frazzled, things actually take longer. And I don't think I'm making that up. I think that we make stupid mistakes when we're in a hurry. And it's really a shame not to give yourself that time. So if you were doing something, you tried to shove too much in and that you were meant to take a break, but that you didn't plan appropriately for your break, and now you're feeling guilty because you're like, well, I said I would be back in 2 weeks, but it took me a week and a half to finally get into break mode. Consider that maybe you want to do yourself the kindness of squeezing a little bit of break still out of this break. Because I think it's important in a break to do things that are different from our regular life. That's the whole point. So I want you to think back, like, what did I do on this break that was different? And how did it make me feel? And then you also can think about the less positive parts, because I thought about on my break when I finally had a few days off, I was like, wow, this feels really relaxing and good. And I was able to read some books, which I really missed, right? So I realized that, like, wow, this is one thing that I'm going to have to change when I emerge from my break. I really missed reading, and I literally didn't have time to read before. So that's a great takeaway, right? Maybe during your break, you saw friends or you traveled and you're like, wow, I never let myself do this in my day-to-day life. That's something important to analyze. But also then when you're on your break, there's some things about your everyday work life that you might actually miss. Like for me, I actually did miss that structure and that routine of sitting down and communicating with my clients and, having the office hours with my writing coach on demand people and, helping people out and talking to, like, I missed that stuff. I missed being at my writing desk. I missed a lot of that. However, I started worrying about how am I going to get it all done when I emerge from my break. And so there are things that you might worry about. Like when you're taking your break, it's hard for you to not start future tripping, I think. And I was doing this. And as I mentioned in the introduction, I got super, super anxious and super stressed out, worrying about how I would deal with everything after my break. Because here's a really weird thing is that when you have those plates spinning in the air, I think part of us goes into autopilot. And so maybe we're able to get more done because we're not paying attention or something and we're just used to it. But then once you stop, you end up really analyzing like, whoa, I was doing maybe too much. I might have a little bit of the workaholic about me. And I think that when you're a writer, that is a dangerous thing. When you're a writer, yeah, you've got a ton of tasks to do, from the writing tasks to the platform tasks to the other tasks that you have in your life to actually keep your life going. But you also have this artistry, which I think requires a little bit of space, a little bit of breathing room. And so I think it's important to, when you come back from a break, to create more space for yourself so that that creativity can expand into that space. So now the next thing is, I think it's important to look at the transition period. Because remember I said that having a break and coming out of your break is not like flipping a switch. It's actually a full process. It's a turning point. It's a transition. There's a time that you're going to have to be kind to yourself between being off and then resuming or starting writing or other writing related activities, right? So now think to yourself, okay, this transition point, was it self-imposed? Did you decide on a date ahead of time, or was it imposed by someone or something else? Because for me, I think that, okay, in one sense, it can definitely make it a lot more certain that you're going to start again if you choose a date ahead of time and that it's a meaningful date. I often talk about meaningful dates. It's not just an arbitrary date, but it's really like, okay, if I don't start by this date, I can't do A, B, and C that I promised to do, and I won't stick to it. So for me, for example, I needed to start up again because A, I have clients completely depending on me. They've got books coming out. They need me to do the editing for them. They need me to be finished with that stuff. But also I've got this podcast that I had told myself it has to be released this week. I've got my newsletter I need to send everybody. And really, in terms of my career, in terms of plates spinning, if I don't keep reminding people that here I am as a writing coach, not to be paranoid, but I feel that if I'm not there present helping you out, maybe you're going to find somebody else who can help you in a different way or a similar way. And I'll have lost my opportunity to work with someone super awesome. So, that FOMO in a way maybe is what gets me going. And then, of course, I was also strategic and I started thinking about things because I'll talk about what changes after a break, the realizations we come to. But there are some things where we have these obligations that we should be aware of. Sometimes we think, oh, I'll have time to do this. And literally you don't. We're all on numbered days. Whether we feel like we have a lot of days stretching out in front of us or less. I always feel like if you want to be a writer, go ahead and do it. Don't tell yourself, I'll do it tomorrow. Unless, again, you're on a well-deserved break that is actually going to fuel your writing and your productivity in the future. So I think it's cool that once you've chosen a date and you've chosen, you're sticking to that date, you've chosen why it's important to you. I think it's important to mark that turning point in a way that is meaningful or maybe even ceremonial, like have some gesture. Now, whether that gesture is popping a bottle of champagne and, kind of doing a toast to yourself or doing a vision board. So I've literally organized a vision board evening for tomorrow. I'm very excited about it because I think that doing a vision board really helps to kind of focus your vision. And I almost feel like maybe I should have done a vision board before my date to start up again, but I'm seeing this as a process. Usually I'd be like, I'm starting up, everything needs to be started up 100% on day one. And that is a lesson for you that I don't think that should be the thing. It's a process, right? So it's okay that my vision boards are tomorrow and that I'm doing the podcast today. That's fine. You can also do a to-do list. I think that helps you to get so much clarity. And I've also done something where I've bought myself a new daily planner. And old me would have been like, no, stupid, you missed January 1 and it's now January 16th and you don't have a new daily planner. You've missed the boat. And it's like, no, that's stupid. So I've bought a new daily planner. And if you're in my Writing Coach on Demand group, you're going to actually get a link to the daily planner that I bought because I'm putting a lot on this. But I think that the more organized you can be, the better. And this new daily planner, I'm putting a lot of hope in it that is going to help me to really get everything down in one place, get my clients organized, get my tasks organized, be batching stuff. We'll be talking more about that. I think that's really important. In this transition as well, I think you need to be examining your feelings as the date of the end of your break nears. As I mentioned, I was an absolute basket case. Absolute. And, sometimes I think it's like that first day of school, like pre-first day of school feeling, horrible. I was literally just, completely anxious. And this is stuff that I was putting on myself. And, but oftentimes we all have people who depend on us. And so it makes us even more of a basket case. And we start telling ourselves these lies about what's going to happen if we mess up and how, our break was for nothing and all that stuff. So I really think it's important to look back on your break and celebrate what the best parts were, right? What were the best things about it? And it's great because I've got a few good friends who, when I got on the phone with them today, I was kind of, still freaking out, admittedly. And they're like, what were the best parts? Tell me what were the best parts and what were the parts that weren't so great? And I think that having that balance, being able to express that, whether it's to a friend or a therapist or to your journal, that is just really, really awesome. So think of what were the best parts and then think of ways in which you can keep the spirit of that break going. It's so fun. Like usually in a break, you're going to come to this new just revelation about something, or you're going to have a new habit, for example, something that's fun or that makes life better or that's healthier. Or maybe you have a new attitude, right? You've figured something out. You're like, wow, maybe you read a line in a book that really resonated and you're like, okay, this totally makes everything different. I totally understand things from a different point of view now. So maybe you have a brand new attitude, or maybe you've managed to kind of have this goal of having more balance because there's some things that you've realized that you really, really need to be a balanced individual. There are things that you have figured out that you cannot leave to only break times. So you need to have that balance between your work and the things that feed you. And that kind of rolls into new resolutions, which I think is good. And I think do not don't over resolve, because that's a lot. But definitely having some new resolutions that you're excited about, that's really cool. And as I mentioned with the whole planner thing, with my daily planner, having new tools can super help you to come out of a break stronger, more productive, more, everything than ever before. So my daily planner is a tool, maybe new technology is a tool. Maybe you decided that you're ready for that new laptop because your laptop is freezing up every time you try to do something with it. I mean, that can be amazing. Or maybe you decided to finally spring for, the Adobe Suite, and now you can make really cool graphics for, your podcast episodes or your book cover or your Pinterest posts, without having to do the same old, Canva ones that everybody uses, even though those seem to be a time saver for some. I've never figured it out, and that's fine too. Or maybe you've decided it's finally time to level up with a course. I think that after a break is a fantastic time to take a course. Now, if you're feeling that maybe I'm going to be overwhelmed because I'm just starting up again, fair enough, but I think maybe look into a course and see, is it better for me to do this while I do all my other stuff, or is it better for me to actually set a new break aside to take these courses that I need to level up? That is up to you, of course, right? But I think that that's a cool thing to do. Now let's talk about how starting up again after a break is such an opportunity. I think that starting up again after a break, it's such a refresh. It's such an opportunity to really go for what you want and to see what is truly important to you and what's not so important to you. Getting out of a break and having that clarity helps you to get out of autopilot, right? So many of us, once we have those plates spinning, as I mentioned, we feel like we're getting so much done because we are on autopilot. And as writers or creatives, I don't feel that being on autopilot is necessarily a good thing because you're dulling the experience, right? So get off autopilot and see if there's anything else that you need to master or brush up on, or see if, for example, there's some trends that you missed. Like when we're talking about things like author platform or writing, the fact that you had more time to go through social media, or you had more time to watch documentaries, you had more time to read the news or read books or whatever it is, you might be seeing some interesting trends that, hey, while you were on autopilot, you missed them. And maybe there's something that don't necessarily apply to you and your career and your book, but maybe they are. And I think it's really cool to have these fresh eyes and be like, okay, this is my opportunity. How do I jump on this? Right? And also when you're starting up, I talked about feeling guilty about doing my vision boards a day after I did the podcast and I was like ramping up. Stop it. Don't feel guilty. You need a warm up when you're coming in from a break. Okay. This is like quitting the gym for a while and being on a break from working out. So you can't go to the gym and do the same, the same thing that you were doing when you were at the peak of your, fitness level, and that you were doing, a bunch of push-ups and you were running on the treadmill for 30 minutes or whatever. Like, no, you're going to need a warm up. If not, you're going to be in a world of pain later on. You are going to be overwhelmed. Be okay with the fact that you might feel rusty. You want to know something really silly? Like when I hadn't written in a little while, I hadn't been typing, I literally felt rusty at the keyboard. Like how weird is that? Like I felt like my hands got tired more easily. I mean, that's really crazy, but also I think I was being ultra sensitive to it. And also I think that there's such a thing as pain points that we ignore when we're in it. You know what I mean? You get so used to it that you're like, oh, this is normal. Like, kind of the gym analogy still goes, right? You're like, oh, it's normal for my knee to hurt until one day your knee falls apart, right? So you're typing at your keyboard and you're like, oh, it's normal for my wrist to hurt until you've got carpal tunnel syndrome and you're not able to type at all. Or you might be like, oh, it's normal for me to push through on these storylines that don't feel like they're working, but I just need to push through until your story's not working at all. And you've been pushing through things and ignoring, for example, some of the stuff that you didn't know that you're like, I'll figure it out later. Eventually it becomes impossible to ignore these things. So I think when you're starting up again, notice the pain points. Don't use the pain points as an excuse to quit, but definitely notice them and think to yourself, how can I start doing things better, more streamlined, better form, better kind of work processes? How can I do that? That's really important. So kind of an interesting thing that happens is when people take a break and they start again, whether it's with writing or with the gym or even with a career, they kind of have this guilt in a way that is linked to the fact that they took a break. So, I think that you should not have these unrealistic expectations or demands of yourself. You shouldn't be like, oh, how dare I take a break and be embarrassed of it. But you also shouldn't be thinking that you're going to be jumping right back in and hitting the marks that you were before, or that you're going to come back so fresh and wonderful that you're going to be better than ever. Like, again, this is a process. So acknowledge that you had a break and that you're different now. Right? So oftentimes they'll tell people when they're starting a new job after having been on maternity leave for a few years, or after having been fired and having taken time off, they're like, shape the narrative. Acknowledge that you had a break, see which kind of skills you actually earned in different ways during this break, and then also see what you want out of your career moving forward, because it's such an opportunity. It's a shame if you don't really take it as such. And seriously, this is really a juncture where you're going to get a lot out of having a coach to speak to, because oftentimes that guilt and that expectation and all of it, it creates a very bad mental situation where your mindset is a little bit messed up. So I think that that's something that speaking to somebody who's balanced, who's professional, who's been around the block a few times, and who's seen other people who've done it as well, I think that that could be super valuable. So don't bother with the guilt. It happens. Don't bother with feeling bad for yourself and with agonizing over it. Like, yes, it happens, but don't waste your time or start to focus on it, because that's not going to be very helpful either. Right? So let's say that if you haven't taken your break yet, or you're about to come out of the break, but you're still thinking like, am I ready? Here's some things that really could help you with your writing specifically, because I had said that I did the research and that, all this stuff was talking about the writing skills and everything else, and that nothing talked about the mindset and everything else. But I think it's good for us to talk about the writing specifically. I think that during a break, especially writers should be reading a lot. See what's out there. Read a lot and read like the critic that you now are. Read like a writer. And this is something that's really key, and I think I'll be making more podcast episodes about this, but reading is probably the best education that any writer can possibly have, especially when you read in a critical way, making notes of what works, what doesn't work, what you would like to try to, do to emulate that or not in your writing. That can be amazing. Another thing that you can do as you either plan a break or start coming out of a break is think about what kind of schedule would work for your actual creative writing, because many of us just try to squeeze in the writing at any point that we're able to find time. And in my course From Idea to Published in 6 months, one of the things that I have you do in the foundation month, which is month 1, is to actually make time for that writing, but not just any old time, but making time that is going to be creatively productive for you. So try to analyze, when am I best creatively at writing? Or when am I best productivity-wise at writing? Make a schedule and try to stick to it if possible. Another thing that you can do is start journaling. I really think that journaling is one of those things that can help you so much on so many different levels. And again, we'll be having an episode 100% dedicated to journaling. And if you hear the word journaling and you're rolling your eyes and you're thinking like, oh my God, that's totally not for me, I think you probably have an idea about journaling, which I used to have too. I thought it was this lame, like affirmations, manifesting, like blah, blah, woo woo thing, which it's not. Like journalism can be a great mindset tool. It can be a fantastic creativity tool. It can help you to document your emotions so that you can make your characters more emotionally varied and subtle and cool. So I think that journaling can be amazing. We'll talk about that more later, but definitely I think that's something to think about. And I want you to also think about revisiting old writing projects from the depth of your computer. It's really cool to do this because so many of us writers are the same, that, we've got our work in progress, but we've got all these projects that we started and stopped, whether it's a page or 10 pages or even a whole manuscript, and we kind of dropped it. I don't think I'm alone in this. I have a bunch of them. And, at one point, it's important to realize that we were in love with this project. And then somewhere along the way, we burnt out on it. So can we revisit this? Can we reuse this in some way so that it's not lost? And again, it's not lost because it was a learning experience, of course, but I don't think you should discount your old projects. You might reread them and wince, but is there a way to improve on it rather easily and come out with something, even if it becomes a freebie or even if it becomes, just something that you do for yourself, that can be kind of interesting. I want you also to be realistic about the issues that you had. The problem, again, those pain points I talked about. So whether the pain points in your writing skills themselves or vis-a-vis a character in your book that's not working or a plot point. Be really realistic about that. And really, I would say have some fun with writing prompts and start just constructing stories in a way that's really straightforward. So let me tell you kind of a funny little story about this book that I published during my break. I decided that, this is under one of my pen names and I wanted to make it less complicated than anything that I ever do. Usually my plots tend to go back and forth, or there tend to be a lot of movement or a lot of different levels of meaning, things like that. And this one, I was like, I want this to be so straightforward and just fun. And I just want, to give people a bigger than life character and, some romance, a little bit of smut. And let's see what we can do just with a really simple thing. And I decided, you know what? I want to just tell the story as if I was just speaking it. Scene by scene, I'm just going to go through and just tell the story. No complication whatsoever. So I literally recorded this story. I transcribed it, and then I went through and I edited it. You know what? I'm so proud of this story. I think I was telling myself this lie that my plot needed to have a certain level of complication. And let me tell you, the reviews are starting to come in on this book, and people are loving the fact that it is just a joy to read because it's straightforward. So this is something that I'm thinking, if you have this pain point and you're thinking, my book's not sophisticated enough, I need to work to make it that way, you might not need to. You might not need to. So be honest about the things that you really need to do for a good book, because it might not be true. So definitely be prepared. Be realistic about that. Get a writing buddy also, if you can, or level up again with a writing coach or an editor, because many of us are in this plates spinning thing. We're writing and we're so in the writing thing and so in our own head that we don't look outside of ourselves, and we don't look at the resources that we have right there that could really improve our work. It could take us up a level, absolutely improve things. And I think that having taken a break and starting up again, why are you making the same mistakes? Get the help, right? Be honest about whether you need the help. And also, in the future, be honest about how you've changed as a writer. Remember that you should be having some fun, but also you need to be working to keep moving forward as a writer. And also be honest about whether you are feeling that you're nearing burnout again and need another break. I think that that's really useful. There should be no shame in telling yourself, you know what, this break needs to become a regular thing. I think that's something I'm definitely going to implement. And it's weird to say it, but I feel like I didn't systematically have these kind of formal breaks in the past. And I think that that's really important, because there are some things that I really decided myself that I learned and that I decided in the course of my break. And I think I'm going to share them with you. I think that this could be pretty interesting to you if, you're still kind of on the fence about this whole break thing, or thinking about how do I start up again after a break. Here's some of the things I realized. I realized that I need to create more time for my own writing. It is such an important thing to me, and I lied to myself. I decided that I needed to be there for my clients, and I needed to give up a lot of my own writing in order to deliver for what my clients wanted. But now I've realized that writing consistently is what helps me to coach both the technical writing stuff and the mindset stuff that I experience while I'm going through the writing. And, I realized that I had a massive problem with this balance when I noticed that my book, Gone to Ground, is currently out. I was querying it, and this really cool New York agent asked to see more. So first they asked to see the first 100 pages, and so I got them that. And I wasn't even really waiting. I would have been on pins and needles normally, right? Waiting for them to get back to me. And I wasn't, because it was one less plate that I had to deal with. And that's when I realized that maybe I had too many plates happening and that I wasn't really putting enough focus on my own writing. And the good news is that book, now that agent has asked for the rest of the manuscript. So they're reading the whole thing. That's a great sign. And now I'm getting a little bit more antsy about where's this book going to go. I mean, I don't know really if I want it to be conventionally published or if I want to self-publish. I think I've got a good market if I chose to self-publish. But I also want to give my clients that experience of having done both, right? The conventional publishing and the self-publishing. So, that's something. My fingers are crossed, but I'm realizing that, the more success I have with my own writing, the more my clients can feel that they're learning from me with all of those new experiences in the writing realm. So it's important. And also, I just like to write. So I need to stop this abnegation and this, oh, woe is me, I don't have time to write my own stuff. It's important for me to do audits when it comes to my business and writing life, right? Is it imbalanced? Yes, it was. So how can I actually, recreate a balance and do the things that actually move the needle and stop doing the things that don't, right? it's going to apply. This audit idea can apply to any of you with a life, right? Whether or not you have another job or you're a parent or whatever else you're doing, whatever else you're juggling with your writing, I think that coming out of a break, you can create an audit and you can get excited as to the possibilities of how you can balance it all because, can you balance everything? No. Can you cut some things out? Probably. I also noticed a difficult thing to swallow, which is that a lot of the social media stuff I had been forcing myself to do actually doesn't yield much when it comes to getting clients and making sales and selling books. So I'm really going to have to work on some more unsexy stuff like my blog, like Pinterest, like SEO, maybe even long form videos on YouTube, rather than trying to count on things like Facebook and Instagram or Twitter, which I dropped a long time ago, but those things weren't really moving the needle. And when it comes to things like TikTok, which is actually how I've found a lot of my clients, I think I need to be realistic about which kind of videos actually get me the clients or actually sell the books, as opposed to the kind of videos that get more views. I think I need to give up that whole, desire to having a ton of views by doing something super entertaining and focus on promoting what I can do for people and also kind of teaching people, like giving them a quick takeaway and then encouraging them to come to me for more. So really, I think that one of my big goals is going to be to kind of focus and clarify what my message is and what my priorities are. And I think that's something really important for everyone who's a writer. Another thing I realized was that being organized does not come naturally to me, but it is key. And I think that, that daily planner, whether you have a daily planner or you're just doing to-do lists and have a different way of organizing yourself, maybe with your phone and everything, I think all of us, especially writers, we can definitely stand to be more organized and to create calendars and batching our work and, doing all those productivity hacks that can definitely help you out. If you go check out my course From Idea to Publish in 6 months, I definitely have all of this fabulous productivity stuff that definitely is something that will really get you going in the right direction once you're off of this break and starting up seriously with the writing thing. Now, here's really important. It's important to know that priorities are a thing and they change. And it's really tough to implement a reshifting of priorities, but it is crucial. So long before I took my break, I realized I was coming dangerously close to having like too many one-on-one clients. And, I love my one-on-one clients, but again, this is the whole reason that I spent so much time pre-break building my Writing Coach on Demand business and my From Idea to Publish in 6 months masterclass, because it is so hard to say no to cool new projects. But I realized that, okay, it's actually a good idea for me to talk to the majority of the people more briefly or to help them through this course that I thought up, in such a way that's going to help a lot of people. And that way I can accept just the very few projects that are going to really enrich my life and that I know that I can specifically help with more than anybody else. So that's really important. And I think that this is something that you need to think about in your life. Like, what are my priorities? What should I set a cap on? Should it be extra work projects? Should it be travel? Should it be socializing? Should it be how much I spend on things like social media? All of these things are really painful to give up, but sometimes I think that a dry January of sorts with those time and energy suckers is kind of an important thing. And finally, remember that just because you took a break does not mean that you're going to come out of it and be perfect, okay? Have you heard the thing, you can be perfect or you can be happy? Please choose happy. Lean into the joy of the writing process and of the process of reaching out to your ideal reader. Don't worry about being perfect. We can always get better, but I want you to have fun with this. So that is it. Please let me know whether you've taken a break or contemplating a break, or if you've had a hard time coming out of a break. All of those things are really interesting to me to know how you managed them, how it went for you. And I hope that this was helpful, that you got a few actionable tips along the way. And I look so forward to being with you either in office hours or seeing you on social media or helping you one-on-one. I can't wait for all that good stuff that's going to be coming our way in the new year and in season 2 of the How to Be an Author podcast. If you have any pressing writing-related questions or would like to be featured on the How to Be an Author podcast, please feel free to reach out on my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com.